Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 207th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the very difficult topic of corporal punishment in public schools. Today's panel begins with Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and the faculty of Wadsworth High School. Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&D Financial Services. Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. And absent is Tom Finley for the moment. Maybe he'll join us in progress. Patty, the question of permitting corporal punishment in public schools is one question that may be debated as long as there are public schools. As a longtime public school teacher, what are your thoughts?
I have never been in favor of corporal punishment, and to this day, I am still not in favor of it. I think all of us probably grew up in a day and age when corporal punishment was allowed. As a matter of fact, when I first started teaching, corporal punishment was used quite a bit by many different people. I always found it interesting. It was more used by male teachers than by female teachers. Very few female teachers ever used. Well, I should take that back, because if you were in a Catholic school with a nun, you probably got wrapped with a ruler over your
not just the ruler, but an architect's ruler, three-cornered jobby. They hurt.
Oh,
yeah. I have always thought that there are other ways to discipline a student or to get a reaction from them that are actually, safer, obviously, and much more effective. I'm not sure that violence, physical violence by a teacher ever accomplished anything other. They say that violence begets violence, and that's what it does. It has been proven many times over that corporal punishment by faculty is not the best way to discipline students. Now, what are good ways to discipline students? I mean, there's a lot. But I think discipline is always a difficult subject. When I was doing my training to be a teacher, and in subsequent classes that I took, there were all sorts of discipline classes that you could take to show you how to best discipline a student without using corporal punishment. The problem I always had with those classes is they were always based upon having this model group of 25 students who would listen to reason and respond exactly to what you told them. And of course, you never had a class like that. So, a lot of times it just came down to dealing with the situation that a student was in. But there are effective ways to deal with kids to get them to react and respond. I know we had a teacher at the high school that when I first started teaching there, that would always give a student a choice. They could take 2 whacks or they could serve detention. And the kids always took the whacks because it was easier.
It's over, yeah.
Yeah, it was done and over with, and they didn't want to be inconvenienced with the detention. To me, that says the detention would be the much more effective type of discipline to use upon a student. I know that some people say that students will only respond to discipline in the form of corporal punishment because that's what they're used to at home. That shouldn't be the case. What you're producing when you do that is a student that is going to continue with that type of punishment and perhaps lead to a domestic violence situation within their own home. And that's not something that we're looking for. There have been too many cases over the years of corporal punishment being taken too far by somebody who felt that, who got a little overzealous with paddling and the student was hurt. And that never should even come into play as far as teaching. So overall, no way. And I think I'm sure you brought this up, John, because was it in Nebraska or someplace where a school district has set up where they're allowing corporal punishment again. And I can't remember exactly where it was, but we're moving backwards, I think, if that's the way we are going within this country.
That's just in the past couple of weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, just in the past few weeks, I'd seen a blurb. I couldn't find anything about it afterwards when I tried to look it up, and I remember hearing about that. And I thought, my goodness, where are we heading if that's our approach to dealing with students? So, and by the way, I have to say that some of the strictest teachers that I knew within the building, and teachers that were the most feared by students, or at least listened to that teacher, never lifted a paddle in their life, never threatened any type of corporal punishment, but were able to control discipline problems within their classroom without doing that.
As long as it's hanging over your head, you behave.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be corporal punishment to be hanging over your head. Trust me, like I said, most kids prefer the wax to a detention, something that actually is going to inconvenience them. And that's the best way to get them.
Bryan, did you attended school on military bases?
Yes, mostly grade school. I don't recall ever getting paddled at school.
Well, you were always a good boy, weren't you?
No, my dad would probably lay into me when I got home when he found out that I got paddled at school. So I would agree with Patty that we've really passed the point of trying to use corporal punishment to change behavior. Now, I will add that if there were maybe a few more swats at home or some discipline at home, we wouldn't have some of the problems that teachers and administrators are faced with at school. There was never a day that I felt comfortable lipping off to a teacher or an administrator. If the teacher asked me a question, I answered the question. I always had, I thought, pretty good relationships with my teachers in high school. I respected them. I listened to them. I did my homework. I did my best to behave. Yeah, there were certain times when things got a little out of hand, but the minute that teacher gave you the glare, you knew that it was time to really buckle down, because the last thing you would want is that teacher to send home a note to your mom or dad, because there wasn't any question who was at fault. It was
all good teachers have that glare.
Yeah, I believe it, Patty. I believe it.
Yeah.
You know,
you cultivate it.
You were never, I mean, the thought that somehow that teacher was sort of had a personality conflict with you, or didn't understand you, or just didn't get along with you, that was never a question. It was never the teacher's responsibility to get along with the student and to be my friend. And that was driven home many, many times. I have 3 younger brothers. There were 4 boys and a girl. And there were times that, you know, when my mom said, when your dad comes home, you knew when you walked in that door, it was going to rain down on you. Okay. And that doesn't happen, it seems, anymore, because unfortunately, from what I see, and I do have a daughter. She's not in any of our school systems. She's down in North Carolina. She's a guidance counselor. So her experience is probably with the kids that have the most problems. But it's unbelievable. Well, I believe it because it just shows you where we've come with parenting. When a parent comes in because there's a discipline problem, they don't, you know, it's not their student. What's that teacher done to my kid? You know? Why isn't that teacher, you know, a little more sympathetic to my kid? Now that kid is probably, you know, just off the rails by the time it gets to my daughter. But we've sort of flipped the script when it comes to discipline. And I think we really need to spend a little more time with parents to say, when your child goes out and goes to school, there's a time and a place for messing around and all that kind of stuff. I just think that we need to elevate the conversation and attack it where the problem is. And I see the problem being at home. And the schools have to put up with the consequences of poor parenting. And so, I don't agree with the corporal punishment. I believe in discipline. I believe in making sure kids are held accountable and that there are consequences for their behavior. I will throw in this. I follow a couple of Facebook groups and stuff. And every now and again, someone will post something about, why their kid got snagged for wearing X at school. And my thought would be, let's go with what the parochial schools have done very successfully, is institute a uniform at a public school. I really think that will allow people to feel part of a school. There's been countless studies that show that a simple uniform allows kids to break down socioeconomic barriers. It allows them to study. It allows them to focus on things that are important. So let's bring back in some of our public schools, and I would suggest this for Wadsworth City Schools, bring back, have uniforms. Yeah. And I think a lot of discipline problems, and I didn't go to a parochial school, I didn't go to a Catholic school, but I think they probably have less discipline problems than some of the public schools have because of that very simple standard that they request. And you look at these charter schools, LeBron James's school over in Akron, uniforms. So there must be something there. So, that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, just one question before we go on to Ron. In the classes that you had in grade school on military bases, did you have any incorrigible kids in the class?
Sure. I mean, every school has. Oh yeah. Now, these weren't military instructors. These were teachers that were contracted to the Department of Defense that lived over in Germany. They lived, on the base or near the base, and they taught. But, when your dad walks in his military uniform, someone is gonna pay a price. And trust me, it's not gonna be the teacher and it's not gonna be the administrator that called your dad to the school, because the last thing you wanted was your mom or dad showing up at school to pull you out.
Yeah, Ron, did you go to Catholic grade schools in high school?
Yeah, I did, 8 years. We only had one nun with a ruler, and she had made it about 2/3 of the way through, and they carted her off. She was, now knowing what I know, this woman was bipolar, and go into great detail about her pedagogical techniques too. But there was only one. It was a very good experience in general. Well, I reached out to 4 people that I thought might have some little better grasp of this. One was a retired elementary school teacher. One is a retired social worker who specialized in family counseling, and 2 psychiatrists that I happen to know. So I posed them these comments. My own view is that it teaches violence as a way to affect behavior change. It's a gross violation of the trust that must exist between children and their teachers, and it doesn't work. Defiant children remain defiant. And personally, I would prefer to have nonviolent ways for conflict resolution. So I sent this off to some folks, and my school teacher, and I won't reveal her name since she told me some personal things, was in agreement generally with what I said, and revealed that she had been paddled and spanked quite a bit when she was a child, not in school, but at home, and just made her more defiant. She figured, I'll get them. I'll get them next time. They're not going to control me. So that was a defiance that didn't work. The social worker is Lowell Nofziger. You may know Lowell. And he writes to me, and I'll just read some of these or scan them. You can get compliant behavior at the moment with corporal punishment, but you haven't even slightly attempted to find the cause or the goal of the misbehavior. The result is the behavior either gets worse, it gets internalized and results in depression, or the behavior gets displaced and acted out somewhere else, or both. The cause of the misbehavior is addressed, nothing positive will result unless this is called. Discipline, he says, means to teach. This is an interesting comment. What is being taught with corporal punishment? To hit or to show love? To resolve problems by hitting or to install fear? There are many more positive and effective methods available than there are now. There's no reason for corporal punishments, and he gives a reference to a parenting a technique and so forth for good parenting. I reached out to Dr. Valerie Chamberlin, who happens to be my daughter-in-law, but she's a clinical psychologist and works in a hospital situation in Los Angeles and teaches at UCLA and teaches medical students. And she says she doesn't have time to send a full response, but she sent me a link to a 37-page PDF article, which I'll be happy to send to you, but I'm not going to read it. She was good enough, though, to summarize this about it. Corporal punishment teaches children to settle interpersonal conflicts with physical force and inflict pain. It leads them to being unable to develop trusting, secure relationships with authority figures, and can have much long-lasting physical and mental harm on students. Creates an unsafe and violent school environment that impacts both the child receiving the punishment and the other children witnessing it. More frequently used on Black children, boys, and disabled children than their peers. It is used in a wide variety of non-serious behaviors, including things like being late, violating dress codes, running in halls, going to the bathroom without a pass, mispronouncing words, and receiving bad grades. Research in corporal punishment has shown that many other methods of discipline are effective in promoting self-control, eliminating undesirable behaviors, promoting desired behaviors in children, and the nonviolent methods of addressing inappropriate behavior in schools, such as behavior management and school-wide positive behavior supports, are more effective and less damaging to children there. I also reached out to another friend of mine, Dr. Laura Dadashti, who is also a clinical psychologist, also in California. And she sent me an article which was from, where was it from? It was from Harvard School of Education. It was reported there. And it was a study of titled "The Effect of Spanking on the Brain," and this was took 147 students and using MRI methods, showed them photographs that represented emotional responses: fear, anger, happiness, and studied the brain things. And it found that the activity in the brains of children who were spanked versus those who didn't spanked were elicited. There was more activity when they showed pictures of violent behavior or disapproval, and it says, let's see if I get the corporal punishment and elevated neural response threatened children is the name of the study. And the other thing it observed changes in brain response for the children's sense of images featuring facial expressions indicating emotional response. Okay. They found that children who had been spanked had a higher activity in response to the areas of their brain that regulate these emotional responses and detect threats, even to facial expressions that most would consider non-threatening. Spanking elicits a similar response in children's brains to more threatening experiences like sexual abuse. You see the same reactions in the brain, the researcher said. These consequences potentially affect the brain in areas often engaged in emotional regulation and threat detection. So as Lowell finally says in his final thing, just don't do it. Just don't do it. And it's interesting to find clinical data on this, on the effect of this, and I think important.
It's been there for years. Bryan, I wanted to respond to your uniform thing. I was always one that thought that kids should be able to dress how they feel. However, I had kids that went to Catholic school, and my daughter wore a uniform for 8 years, and of course she hated it. But once she got to the high school, she was there for about maybe 6 months, and she said to me, I really do miss my uniform. And the reason was, like you said, everybody was dressed the same. She didn't have to decide what to wear every morning when she got up. I think uniforms are great. As far as your friends on your Facebook page, or acquaintances, I should say, as far as getting in trouble for certain clothing, yes, there were students that I did send out of my room, but it was because the clothing was inappropriate. It was too revealing. You'd be surprised what kids come dressed in.
Well, I'm not surprised anymore.
And I did once remove a student who came in a Halloween costume because he came in as a KKK member. And I'm sorry, and I believe in free speech, but not in my classroom. I was, you know, my classroom was not a democracy. I was the dictator, and you do what I say. And I'm not going to sit there and stare at somebody in a KKK outfit.
You were a benevolent dictator.
Of course.
That's what I told our kids. I said, our home is not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. And your mom and I are benevolent dictators.
Yes.
And we'll die on every hill and we'll fight every battle. So
there were no uniforms in my school. It was a lower economic area, and the parents' university decided, no, we can't really afford to do that with our children, so we'll dress them the best we can, but no uniforms. And
uniforms are actually cheaper. I mean, and you know, in most schools too, when they have uniforms, for those that can't even afford to buy the uniforms, you can do a buy, like, you know, you grow out of them. So what you would do is take your old uniforms and donate them back to the school so they can be given to a child in a younger age whose parents couldn't afford them. Except like at the end of 8th grade, I know my daughter and her friends got together and had a bonfire and burnt all their uniforms.
From 1940 to 1948, though, it was economically perhaps a little bit different.
Yeah. I think part of the issue when you talk about discipline, it starts a long time before the problem ever comes up. And it's unfortunate that there are young people that, you know, whatever situation they find themselves in, act out to the point where they sort of qualify for a consequence of being detained or serving some sort of punishment. And, you know, we really have to look at it and say, you know, there's got to be a better way, and uniforms, or maybe have the parents come to several, you know, classes at the high school. I know that most times when my daughter talks about students that she really has problems with, there are a lot of problems in the home. I mean, serious dysfunction.
You would be surprised at some of the things that you see, and what maybe you wouldn't be because you have that connection. But students will, I mean, I tell you, I have been called every name in the book, every swear word known to man, I have heard. You know, it's there, you know, that the lack of discipline with some kids, and you do your best to prevent it. You mentioned that, you know, in Catholic schools, other parochial schools, they don't have this problem. Well, no, because they just immediately remove those students from their school. They're not required to keep them. Right. In a public school, you are required to deal with these situations. And you can only even remove a student from the school, you know, for a suspension for up to 2 weeks. An expulsion is totally unheard of. It's very, very difficult to get an expulsion. About the only way I ever saw expulsions is if a student, for example, brought a weapon into school. That was cause for an expulsion from the school district.
Bryan, your comments about parenting, I think my friend Lowell Nofsiger would agree with you. His final thing here is read and learn how to be good parents, and he gives a reference to that. Systematic training for effective parenting, he says, is an excellent resource. So I think you're right. I think it's got to start at home, and then when it doesn't, then hopefully there will be an interaction between the school and the parents to try to train both of them to take care of the kid. This is what's important, isn't it? We take care of our children.
Right.
That's
well, I believe it does tend to start at home, but what is it that starts at home? You know, I think that I've never been a school teacher, but I'm guessing that in the fall, you wind up with a classroom full of people that children who come from a variety of experiences in home, and that in some cases, the physical pain is the only thing that they'll respond to. Now, my own personal experience as a kid, I wasn't really disciplined in school that much, but at home it was a different story. And that I think what I learned from physical punishment was the humiliation and fear of authority. I can't think of anything positive about either one of those things.
No.
When I think about the people that I knew in the military, I lived a sheltered life in Cuyahoga Falls and going to Catholic school and all that. When I went into the military, I met people from all over the place, from inner cities to Eastern Kentucky, all sorts of backgrounds. And I think that the stockade was the only place where they learned how to behave in some cases. But I agree with those who are on the side of what, physical punishment just teaches a kid that violence is the solution to a problem.
Right.
And student behavior is something that you can't predict. I mean, I had too many families where, I knew the parents, they were great parents. I had one kid that was just fantastic. Then the next one was a nightmare, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's
hard to tell. My wife has a cousin who was married while she was in college, and her husband went to a military base in Alabama, and she taught school. Her first job as a school teacher, she walked into a classroom and was escorted into the classroom by the principal, and there's a whip hanging on the wall. This is in rural Alabama. And she looks at the whip, and the principal said, that's the only thing that some kids will respond to. I mean, it was like, yeah.
It's
Well,
sad because those kids have been damaged already.
Yeah.
It's sick. Yeah.
Well, folks, thank you very much. In 2 weeks, I'd really like to explore some detailed questions about climate change and what we can actually do about it. But we'll sign off with that and see you in 2 weeks.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.